Run through a few rules of grammar and capitalization when it comes to bill drafting. In terms of the rules of punctuation, what are some things that we use or don't use? A period. Of course, we use that at the end of a sentence. Also, in subdivisions or paragraphs, we utilize those. For example, setting off a number of conditions that must be met or satisfied. Even if they are not a full and complete sentence, we'll set them off by a period. An exclamation point, we don't use. A question mark, we don't use in statutory drafting. Do we use colons? Yes, the most common we see is to set off a series, such as a number of definitions. So you might see, for purposes of this subdivision, the following definitions apply, colon, and then the listing. Semicolons, not often, sometimes to set off a series, but generally we use the comma in California. And then, of course, what some things that we should also consider using or not using. Synonyms. They might be good for creative writing, but not in statutory drafting because we want consistency. Acronyms, we generally do not use them. The few instances, I've particularly found them in the Welfare and Institutions Code, such as CalWORKS, TANF, some commonly understood acronyms. Some states' drafting manuals say that commonly used or understood acronyms like AIDS can be used in statutory drafting, but it's very limited that we use acronyms in California. Quotation marks, the only time we really use those is defining a word or phrase, so in definitions. Parentheses, we don't use them for parenthetical statements. In parentheses, for example, or e.g., we don't use it there. But obviously, we use parentheses around the small letters, capital letters, numerals for delineating between subdivisions, paragraphs, subparagraphs, clauses, and subclauses. Numbers in California, we generally use both the numeral as well as the spelled out word. So $100 fine would say $100, parens, number sign 100, end parens. Commas used consistently. And don't forget the Oxford comma rule, which is very important in legislative drafting. How about possessive words? We don't use them too often. We don't say very often, for example, the licensee's payment. We'll say the payment of the licensee, for example. They're not never used, but they're rarely used. And those are just a few rules of punctuation and grammar to keep in mind in drafting California statutes.